I pulled up, grateful, in front of my house after an empty 3-hour drive from Scotland, the same house I had left that morning. Everything seemed exactly the same, and yet, although the Earth's pole did not change polarity and no global cataclysm occurred, my life inexorably changed. Last night, my beautiful wife Erica and I skipped watching TV to spend the evening happily discussing our long-planned vacation to Antigua, which was less than 2 weeks away, and in the morning she sent me off with a long and very loving kiss. But when I used the remote control, the garage door opened up to reveal another car parked where mine should have been. It was the same BMW, the same make and year, but a radically different color. I wasn't really suspicious yet, but I was definitely wary until, as I entered the house quietly, my ears were startled by loud music playing, the kind of music that neither Erica nor I particularly liked. Now I was worried. I moved forward carefully and pushed the door of the living room, but I was not at all prepared for the sight that greeted my eyes. A shirtless stranger leaned back, eyes closed confidently in my chair, with my wife on his lap, spread out on top of him with her face pressed against his neck. They had not yet noticed my presence, and I had time to see that her blouse was unbuttoned. I was virtually frozen, unable to believe the scene before my eyes, and in that moment of indecision, all my options except the last one were taken from me. I don't think I made any sound, so they must have both instinctively and simultaneously become aware of my presence, because suddenly I found myself the center of attention of two pairs of surprised and quite shocked eyes. For the past 3 years, as part of an elected 6-member administrative committee, I have spent one weekend each month at a meeting in Edinburgh, leaving there early on Friday morning and returning home early on Monday evening. I can't mention anything about the topics we discussed in these meetings other than that they had nothing to do with my actual career, but I had official leave from work to attend. It might seem like too much of a sacrifice to sacrifice almost 1 out of every 4 weekends, were it not for the generous rewards of those weekends, which provided additional income, making our above-average standard of living possible. On arriving in Edinburgh earlier that day, I received the terrible news that one of our members had died in a car accident on the way there. As a result, after eating dinner and hanging around indecisively for most of the day, we decided to cancel the entire meeting as a sign of respect for our fallen colleague. I was so stunned that the thought of telling my wife about my early return did not even occur to me. Mouth-watering was the expression I used when I was once asked my opinion of Eric. That was when the possibility of becoming her husband seemed like an impossible dream to me. In my opinion, she is perfect both in figure and face, and her inner character is the same, with generosity of spirit being chief among her many virtues. At 5 feet 6 inches tall, she is slim with nicely rounded breasts and a toned ass, with an exceptionally narrow waist that accentuates these assets well. I also have to say that she has the kind of feet that stiletto heels were made for. Without intending to sound like she's stupid, because she's actually quite smart in her field, she has a certain simplicity of thought that I really liked at times. However, I consider myself the thinking half of our marriage. We met in the common room at a further education college, although at the time I had been admiring her from afar for almost a full semester. Then I was lucky enough to help her with a project and, based on this, ask her out on a date. We've been together for 10 years, married for 8. She was only 22 then, and I was almost 25. We don't have children yet by choice, but we wanted to start a family, so we weren't unaware that the biological clock was already ticking. Arguments are a constant factor in life for many marriages, but I can honestly say that in the entire time since we met, we have not had even a seriously raised voice. I loved her with all my heart, was completely content, and always believed that she felt the same about me. Erica immediately jumped to her feet, the natural look of shock on her face at my sudden appearance quickly giving way to determination. Taking 2 quick steps to put herself between me and her lover, she said, "I'm sorry," but then, to keep her apology from sounding too vague, she added, "I'm terribly sorry that you found out about it this way. I never wanted to hurt you." The guy also quickly rose to his feet. He was white, looked perhaps a few years older than me, and had recognizable Scottish features. Apart from the missing shirt, He was fully clothed, but I suspect his fly was probably undone. There wasn't the panic on his face that I would have felt if I was in such a compromising situation, but he certainly looked very uncomfortable. He was not afraid of violence from me, despite my pacifist behavior. At about 6'2", he was 4 inches taller than me, stockier in build, and showing signs of the same hours spent in the gym that had been at the top of my list of unfulfilled resolutions. It was obvious that he didn't know what to do, but Erica solved his dilemma by whispering over her shoulder, "Dave, go upstairs and wait." Immediately, and without question, he did as she said, almost gratefully. I still didn't speak, but don't think that I just stood there in a daze, because in reality very little time had passed. People talk about moments when time seems to go in slow motion, and this was one of those moments. "How long has this been going on?" I asked calmly. 6 months, at least. It would have been the 6th time if you hadn't come home, my wife told me truthfully. Why is whatever his name is still in the house? I know that if I were in his place, I would want to leave here. His name is Dave, and he has nowhere to go. He lives in Glasgow, but was expecting to spend the night with me, my wife said simply, and tomorrow night too. It may seem like I was unrealistically calm, but I think I was more numb than anything else. "Why?" I asked. "I thought we were happy together." "We're happy. It has nothing to do with it." "Then what does this have to do with?" Erica shook her head helplessly. "I can't tell you. I wouldn't be able to find the words, and I'm afraid that if I tried, I might hurt you more than I already have, completely unnecessary. I had a marriage this morning, I don't have one this evening, and you expect me not to want to know how it happened," I blurted out angrily. "You can still have marriage if that's what you want," my wife said quietly, but then, more emphatically, she continued, "I'll tell you everything you want to know, honey, but not now. When it depends. What do you want to do now?" "I'm trying to find a reason why I shouldn't kick your cheating ass out of the house. Please tell me what you think my options are," I asked coldly. "Divorce is the obvious answer if you think what I did undoes all our years of happiness. I won't blame you. I won't fight and will accept whatever share of our assets you deem fair. I still love you, you see," she finished with real sincerity on her beautiful face. She stood there for a long time, with one tear running down her cheek, and then continued with a choked voice, "If this is what you want, I suppose you should find yourself a hotel room in the city and leave me here. We can meet later, so that I can answer all your questions." "Did you say options plural?" I said, trying to remain distant. This was the first time since we met that I didn't automatically move to comfort my wife when she showed signs of distress. "You can forgive me. You may think that after everything we both put into our marriage, I deserve one mistake, although I admit that my mistake is much worse than just a one-time fling. If we both try, I'm sure that we can be happy again, but I don't think we can ever get back what was lost," she finished sadly. "Why is returning so impossible? My happiness was so complete that I did not want to admit that it was lost forever, and my instinct was to hope that, in time, I could leave it all behind. This will always be between us, even if only in your thoughts. You won't be able to forget when you can't understand why I cheated on you, not just once, but many times over the past 6 months. I can tell you everything, Dave, and I did it together, step by step in every unpleasant detail, but I cannot say why I did it, at least not in the words that I am ready to use." "So what are you suggesting?" If both alternatives had such a dismal prognosis, it seemed we had an impossible impasse. "I think the only answer is for you to watch me have sex with Dave." It was ridiculous. "You've got to be kidding me," I shouted, my original anger reasserting itself. "I'm very, very serious," Erica said seriously. "This is the only way you can understand why I did what I did without me trying to explain. You're telling me that watching you make love to another man will solve all our problems," I said, not trying to hide the disbelief in my voice. "This won't be making love. I'm only making love to you because you're the only man I love," Erica said furiously. "I don't see how you can continue to love me if you're spending time with another man," I told her bluntly. and I have little desire to watch you do anything with the guy upstairs. I left home this morning believing that I had a happy, loving marriage, and now I am in this ridiculous discussion. I know that I have to make a decision, but it will be impossible without knowing how this situation turned out. You sit so calmly, telling me mine. Options, don't you feel any guilt? I'm not calm at all. You don't know how much I'm shaking inside, Erica said with a croak in her voice. I'm shaking because I know how important this decision will be. Darling, you must be thirsty. Let me make us a cup of tea, and then I'll answer your questions as best I can. I coldly confirmed that the tea would be good, and then watched as my wife jumped up to begin the familiar ritual of brewing tea that I must have seen thousands of times before, but under completely different circumstances. In fact, everything seemed so normal that for a moment I could almost believe it was all just a figment of my imagination. The reality of this situation was reinforced by the fact that Erica placed 3 mugs on the kitchen table instead of the usual 2. My brain seemed to be working in overdrive, but as I recall, my thoughts were completely blank, almost as if I had entered some kind of limbo as a protective measure. After adding the milk, Erica carefully brought 2 mugs and placed them on the dining table, carefully placing a coaster under each. Taking the 3rd mug, she headed towards the stairs, casually informing me, "I'm bringing one to Dave. I'll tell him what we're talking about. It won't take more than a minute." In fact, she was gone for almost 5 minutes. In her absence, I turned off the obnoxious rap music, then went to the table and sat down in my usual place. Despite the heat of the freshly brewed drink, I took a few quick sips, feeling grateful for the moisture returning to my mouth. Returning, Erica took a sip from her mug before setting it back down on the table. Leaning forward and looking straight into my eyes, she said firmly, "I did feel a lot of guilt about everything right after the first time, and I feel terribly guilty at this moment for the unhappiness I caused you, but to be honest, in the months between when I cheated behind your back, I didn't feel guilty at all. It was as if I was able to rationalize the guilt by convincing myself that if you didn't know, it couldn't hurt you, and that I deserved that extra pleasure, which I was getting. He was only here when you were away, so you weren't getting any less sex because of him." This inevitably raised other questions, but in order not to interrupt the flow, I decided to leave them for later. "How did it all start?" I asked. Erica seemed relieved to have escaped immediate interrogation. "It was in February," she began. "You were in Scotland for the Valentine's Day weekend. I was usually fine when you were gone, but this time I felt lonely because of the occasion. Friday night, the day you left for Edinburgh, I already missed you a lot. So when Lisa called and invited me to a Saturday evening with her and her husband, I happily agreed. Lisa was my wife's best friend and close work colleague, and I didn't particularly like her. She was quite attractive with a good figure, but it was her morals that made me question her, as she admitted to Erica that she had several short flings or fleeting love affairs. I know from another source that her husband Jack also cheated, so they probably had an open marriage. If so, who am I to judge? My main caveat with her was the unfounded suspicion that she was trying to recruit Erica into her freer, easier lifestyle. When I knocked on the door, it was opened by a tall guy whose name I later found out was Dave. When they introduced us, they said he was Jack's cousin and was staying with them for the weekend. We were going to a Valentine's Day dance, and it was obvious Dave would come with us. I didn't like it because I would feel more comfortable being a third wheel than part of a foursome. But Dave made the evening, at least for me. There was a lot of old-school dancing. I can dance, but not very well, and if he hadn't been there, I probably wouldn't have danced even once, but thanks to him, I almost never left the dance floor. Dave is a great dancer, as good as he could be. Correct my mistakes and leave me feeling like Ginger Rogers. I felt energized after every dance. That's probably when he started touching you and flirting with you, I interrupted bitterly. I didn't want to speak, but the words just came out of my mouth. You're completely wrong, Erica corrected me. I admit that during the slow dances, when he held me close, his hands were always in the right place, and he did not say a single inappropriate word. He did not even try to kiss me after the last waltz, although I saw that I could even feel that he was hoping that I would kiss him, and I was tempted, but instead I thanked him for a wonderful evening. He said that he should thank me because it was an honor for him to dance with him. Such a beautiful woman. I knew from the look on my wife's face as she recalled that last exchange that it was that simple sentence that had broken through her defenses. Up to this point, Erica had been telling her confession while looking straight into my eyes, but as she continued, her gaze shifted to a spot near my right ear. We all drank between dances, but up to that point, all four of us were far from intoxicated. We drank just enough to feel relaxed and happy. The plan was that the taxi would take those three and then take me home. But when we arrived at Lisa's house, she insisted I come in for another quick drink. At that point, I wasn't ready to let the evening go, so it wasn't hard to convince me all the alcohol after that was the start of all the problems. I knew that my wife reacted differently depending on the type of drink, so I asked what she was drinking. At the dance, it was only white wine, but Lisa pulled out a huge bottle of vodka. That was really the start of it all, because she said, "Who said size doesn't matter?" Everyone laughed, and we quickly began to fill our glasses. There were two large sofas in the room, standing at an angle, and opposite the corner there was a large plasma TV, on which, as it turned out, a large glass coffee table was playing. Almost all the space between the sofas was occupied. At first, no one paid attention to the film because everyone was too busy talking, laughing, and drinking. "And they became drunk," I interrupted. Erica nodded. I sat down in the middle of the sofa, and when Dave sat down next to me, he quite naturally put his arm around me, and I didn't see any harm in it. There were two girls and three guys on the screen, all naked, and what they were doing was already made me feel uncomfortable. But then Lisa upped the ante by taking off her panties and throwing them in the air. I turned to say something to Dave, and he took the moment to kiss me. I actually welcomed the distraction because video. The screen definitely wasn't soft, and when I looked back at Lisa and Jack on the other couch, they were almost as bad. At one point, my dress came undone and fell open. My bra was still in place and just covering my nipples, but almost all of my breasts were visible. I don't know how it happened, but it didn't matter because I still felt like it wasn't cheating. "How did you feel?" I found the strength to ask. Erica shook her head. "That's part of what I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that we had sex once on the couch, and two more times in the bed they gave me. It was almost light when we finally fell asleep. He wanted to do it again in the morning, but I refused. I became your loving wife again and felt terribly ashamed. I even covered my body from his eyes, which was ridiculous after everything we did last night. Dave's good quality is his sensitivity, and when he saw that I was ashamed, he found a reason to leave the room, giving me a chance to quickly get dressed. When I finished in the bathroom, he was about to leave for home, and I was so glad that I didn't have to confront him with him at breakfast. I bet Lisa said something. Yes, she had a huge smile on her face when she asked if I had a good time, but I said I didn't want to talk about it. I said it very coldly because I blamed her for everything that happened. Lisa wasn't offended. She simply smiled even wider and said, "Oh, I see you're feeling guilty. Don't worry, honey, it'll pass soon." She was wrong because when I went home, I couldn't stop crying, and I took bath after bath, trying to feel clean again. I was afraid that when you came home on Monday night, you would only need one look into my eyes to find out everything I did to Dave. "I don't understand how you got from there to a 6-month fling," I said, truly puzzled. "You treated me as lovingly as always, and I realized that I may have been able to hide it," Erica continued, as if I had not interrupted. There was still a risk that Lisa might say something because she's capable of that when she's drunk. I still felt some shame, but not as much as before. I was still determined to never do anything again. Similar, but as far as I could see, no harm was done, and I had a fantastic memory for life. "But you did it again, more than once," I reminded her. About a week later, Dave called my cell phone. I think Lisa gave him my number. My wife began to explain. "The first time you were in the room, I pretended it was the wrong number. He understood the situation and said he would call later, And when he did, I was alone. I knew I shouldn't talk to him, but he could be very funny, and he seemed genuinely concerned about me, especially after the way I had acted that morning. He was 300 miles away in Glasgow, and I didn't think he knew our address, so I felt insecure. Security, and in any case, I didn't see anything terrible in it, just chat with him. After a few conversations, he started asking me to meet again, but I always refused until the Friday of the next month came after you left for my meeting. I was quite relaxed until he said he was sitting in his car at the end of our street. He wanted to see me, just to talk, he said. At this point, Erica tried to take a sip from her mug, but finding that it was already empty, she put it back on the table. At first I said no, but he was very persistent, and I eventually agreed to let him in. I actually opened the garage door with the remote and told him to drive right in. I started out with such good intentions, but once he was in the house, we were not at all they said, at least not in the first couple of hours. In my garage, in my house, in my bed, I said bitterly. Not in your bed, in our bed. I couldn't do that to you, so I always took it to the guest room. Erica quickly corrected me. I slept with him again on Saturday night, and he went home very early on Sunday morning. After that, he came every month when you were away. You could meet him on the highway. You're driving one way and he to another, but you were probably always already there before he started. We followed the same routine every time. I don't understand why he didn't stay with you on Sunday, because you knew that I wouldn't be back for another day. I think it's due to his work, I asked, more than out of desire to know the reason. He is his own boss, so he could have stayed. I was the one who asked him to leave early. I was afraid that you might understand that I was with another man, but a period of more than 36 hours seemed long enough for me to return to normal, before ending up in bed with you again. So what exactly am I inferior to him in? You are not inferior in anything, my wife told me passionately. When I'm with you, I feel complete, very loved, completely satisfied. You've always made me feel that way from the very first time we made love, and I couldn't ask for more from you. What about him? He makes me feel like every cell in my body is vibrating in unison, she said simply. I don't understand, I admitted. That's why I think you need to see me with him to understand, my wife said triumphantly, as if she thought I had just proved her point. I wasn't convinced. At first I was quite shocked by this statement, but then I realized that she must be exaggerating for effect. To avoid answering, I switched the subject by saying, in that case, you better tell me more about the guy upstairs. Perhaps a little petty, I decided not to call him by name. He's a pretty decent guy, Erica said almost enthusiastically, as if she was just waiting for the opportunity to tell me about her lover. He's not the kind of person you fall in love with, and there are times when I don't particularly like him, but there's nothing really unpleasant about his nature. I'll bet you're not the first married woman he's seduced, I said suddenly, without conscious intention. He doesn't hide it, my wife said defensively. Dave admitted to me that he has seduced a lot of married women before me, but he doesn't think he's doing any harm. He's not one of those guys who plays with couples, and he never tries to take a wife away from her husband. He just wants to have a little fun without anyone else finding out if possible. He once told me that he believes his intervention actually improves marriages. I let out a mocking laugh. And how did this genius come to this conclusion? He says wives remain more energized and adventurous after the affair ends, and the husband benefits, not to mention the little special tricks she learned. I don't believe that for a second, I said dismissively. A smile flashed across my wife's beautiful face, and she seemed to momentarily forget about the situation as she said, I've already tried a couple of these tricks on you, and you really liked them. There are a few more, but I didn't dare introduce too many at once, so you don't start wondering who's teaching me this. Involuntarily, my mind began to scan through memories, trying to determine when this could have been. I had to wonder if I would have liked these tricks as much if I knew where they came from. Also, I was completely out of words, and after several long moments of silence, Erica asked, Are you close to making a decision? What decision exactly? Do I forgive your betrayal and continue living as before, or do I agree to sit quietly in the chair and watch you and your friend upstairs have sex? Watch, Erica clarified with a pleading look in her eyes. Darling, like I said before, I don't think you can forgive me until you understand, and I don't think you can fully understand until you see this happen. I don't know yet, I said, shaking my head helplessly. That's the last thing I ever expected to be asked to do. After a few more moments, my wife broke the renewed silence by saying, "Can I ask you a question?" And when I nodded, she asked, "Imagine that when you got home a little earlier, instead of cheating, you found me with some illegal substance. What would you do?" This really took the conversation away. I didn't see the connection, but I decided to play along. I would be ashamed of you and most likely disgusted, but I would immediately try to get you into a rehabilitation clinic. Erica nodded. So no talk of forgiveness or divorce. I was puzzled. No, why not? Can't you see that these are the same thing? Erica said passionately. Such people get exquisite sensations. It has nothing in common. What connection do you see? I said rather contemptuously. Some women may be quite happy with sex with their husband, but sometimes they will cheat for the sake of special sensations. But sex with Dave is more like pleasure than making love with you, so they are completely different things, my wife explained hotly and illogically. You just have to look, and you will definitely see it. During this discussion, I couldn't help but be impressed by my wife's unshakable belief that if I watched her having sex with Dave, it would magically make me see her being completely unfaithful. Another world. It was a sight I didn't want to see, but I have to admit that my curiosity grew. Having made my decision, I told her, "Okay, I'll watch you and your boyfriend upstairs have fun, but I can't promise it will help. In fact, I think it will make things worse." Erica's beautiful face lit up with a huge smile, and she jumped to her feet. It seemed to me that she was going to throw herself on my neck and kiss me, but she restrained herself and simply said, "Thank you." She stood there for a few moments as if undecided what to do next, but then said, "I'll go tell Dave. Can you wait a little before coming upstairs? I might need to talk to him." When I brought him his tea, he was ready to leave, and it took me a few minutes to convince him to stay. "How much time?" "Can you give me about 15 minutes? Why don't you make yourself another cup of tea and maybe get yourself a snack while you wait?" she suggested. "I'll have something stronger. I think I'll need it," I said regretfully, already regretting my decision. Time passed quite quickly. I was quite calm, but it was the calm of a man preparing for the test that he had to undergo. I gave them 20 minutes, the time in which I managed to drink my glass without rushing. I headed towards the stairs in a resigned state with a "what do I have to lose" attitude. I had to find out. By the time it was over, I knew the real meaning of heartache. I left the room with relief and headed to our bedroom. Undressing and carefully hanging my clothes, I climbed into bed. After 2 or 3 minutes, it struck me that almost exactly 24 hours had passed since I lay in the same position, but then I was in a completely different mood. About 5 minutes later, Erica ran into the room and jumped into bed with me. Dave stayed the night. He wanted to leave now, but I told him it was stupid to leave at this hour, especially when he was probably tired, she said. "Don't worry, I won't go see him at night." I said nothing except to make some sound to show that I was awake. We lay side by side, barely touching each other, and I think we were both aware of the other's breathing. After a few minutes, Erica said quietly, "Can we?" I told her no. A few more minutes passed before she spoke again. "Are you sure? They say it helps reconnect." At this point, I'm not sure I want to ever reconnect with you again. The disappointment in my wife's voice was obvious when she said, "But do you agree that it was different?" "Oh, it was different, but I don't think it helps. In fact, it's the opposite." "What do you mean?" "I don't want to talk about it now," I said firmly. "I'll give you my decision in the morning, but now that I've watched your performance, can you tell me what you think makes the big difference between your lover and me? I've thought about this a lot over the last 6 months, and I still don't quite understand it," my wife said thoughtfully. He really fills me up much more than you do, and that's part of the reason, of course, but a very small part. I think the fact that I don't love him matters more, or more importantly, that he doesn't love me. He also has a lot of experience with women. He understands how women's bodies work, so he knows all the tricks. Erica paused, then said, "Actually, I think the main, if not the only reason, is simple chemical attraction. Remember from chemistry class in school, those two substances that always caused a violent reaction if they were allowed to touch?" There was another long silence, then Erica added, as if suddenly realizing, "Dave makes me feel great, but he can never make me as happy as you are, and that's the real difference." I wanted to answer, but while I was sorting out in my head what exactly to say, I must have fallen asleep from mental exhaustion. When I woke up the next morning, the place next to me was empty, but almost immediately, as if by a sixth sense, Erica walked into the room, fully dressed and with makeup on. I immediately started to crawl out of bed to get up, but she raised her hand to stop me, saying, "Dave is having breakfast before he leaves. Wait about 15 minutes until he leaves." When she came back downstairs, it struck me that I seemed to be doing nothing but waiting for Dave. However, in this case, I did not mind because I had no desire to encounter this man this morning. At the appointed time, I went downstairs, taking the opportunity to wash and shave while I waited. Halfway down the stairs, I was greeted by the delicious smell of bacon and eggs, and when I entered the dining room, Erica was just setting 2 plates on the table. The coffee mugs were already there. I waited until we both finished eating and Erica looked at me quietly, waiting. She looked particularly beautiful, and that didn't help with what I wanted to say. Taking a deep breath, I began my speech. "I still love you, I think I always will, and I'm pretty sure you love me too, but I can't stay married to you. Last night was a desperate mistake. After you explained how your cheating began, I was on the verge of forgiving you, and I think with time I might forget it. But now I have memories in my mind that I cannot erase. I'm going to find a lawyer to start the divorce process, and I'm also going to start selling the house." Tears streamed down my wife's beautiful face, and she sat sobbing, unable to speak. I let her suffer for 2 or 3 minutes before I quietly said, "This doesn't have to be the end." Erica looked puzzled, but I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked in a trembling voice. "While the divorce is going on, and for a short time after it, in fact, for 6 months, I suggest that we have no direct contact. In fact, it will be better if we do not even see each other. During this time, we'll both be free to have sex with other people, me to get some measure of revenge, and you to hopefully get it out of your system next Valentine's Day. If we both still want to, we'll meet for dinner. At the end of the evening, we will go our separate ways, but from now on we can start meeting again like at the beginning. I'll do whatever you want if it can get us back, but I don't see the point in any of this, and I don't like the thought of divorce," Erica said with genuine confusion on her face. "This idea goes back to Trevor Smith," I began to explain. Now she really looked puzzled. "What does Trevor have to do with it?" "He and I had several clashes before we met, and I hated this smug man. You could say he was my worst enemy. Then, right after our engagement, I found out that you were having a hot affair 2 years ago, and you even lived with him for a couple of months. From that moment on, I couldn't stop imagining you in bed with him. These thoughts were there all the time, and it made me sick. With you because I couldn't stand the thought of feeling like this for the rest of my life." Erica nodded in understanding. "So what did you do?" "I told myself that this is the past, that we are the future, and that we only became who we are the day we met. It worked, and I haven't thought about it since then until last night. I hope that the same technique will help me forget about Dave and everything I saw last night." "You said we could both have sex with others while we were apart. Does that include that?" my wife asked hesitantly. "Technically, yes, but I'd rather you didn't see him. In fact, if you can't stop with him from now on, I honestly don't think we have any chance," I told her bluntly. My soon-to-be ex-wife sat thinking for a moment before saying, "I understand the need for a divorce, but does a separation have to last 6 months? What if the divorce goes quickly? The last 6 months have seemed very long, and the 6 months ahead seem like an eternity. I can't bear the thought of not seeing you for so long. Keeping my tone neutral, I told her, "It will take me 6 months to get over the anger I feel about what you did to us, and you need time to sort through your feelings for Dave and see if you can live without him. You have to find the answer to the question of whether you can experience this pleasure if I'm no longer around. I think you need a full 6 months to sort yourself out, because I don't want you to be with me. Valentine's Day, unless you are absolutely sure that you can remain faithful to me in the future." We spent another 2 hours discussing details and packing my things before the inevitable time came for me to leave. I had my back to the door and Erica stood about 3 feet in front of me. There was a long silence before she asked, "Would you like to kiss me goodbye?" I shook my head and said, "I won't kiss you for 2 reasons. First, because I hope this isn't goodbye, and second, because I'm afraid if I kiss you, I won't be able to leave." The divorce was terribly expensive, and I wondered if I could have done without it, but I decided it was the right thing to do. This was really important because without this legal break, I'm not sure my mind would have allowed me to start over. It's been 3 months since I left home and only 3 months until Valentine's Day, and my lawyer says the divorce will be finalized in mid-January. During this time, I had sex with 3 different women, but I must admit that 2 of them were escorts, both almost on par with my wife in beauty and figure. The first was a month after separation. I had to do something, because I spent this month sadly wandering around in a tiny apartment, completely unmotivated. The second, a blonde named Claire, kept me company on our anniversary. I might not have survived this night if I had been alone. I also met 2 women in nightclubs. One refused to have sex when we got back to the apartment, but I think she might have if I had been a little more persistent. The other one was completely different, a real fireworks display. I met her at a club on Saturday night, and we had almost no sleep that night. She went home in the morning, but returned in the afternoon, and we picked up where we left off. Everything seemed fine, but when we sat down to dinner, she suddenly said, "I can't do this," explaining, "I have a steady boyfriend and I love him." After she left, it struck me that I had unwittingly played the role of another man. 2 weeks ago, I caught a glimpse of Erica. I was at a club, and while slow dancing on a crowded dance floor, I saw her with her arm around a tall man. I felt as if I had been stabbed and quickly left the room. I will definitely be on our date next year, and I can only hope she will be there too. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to